It's coming up to 10 to 5. Now, just before the break, great pub quiz question for you. Which football team inflicted Manchester United's worst ever defeat? It's a record that still stands today. Did you get it? Well, well done you, if the answer was the Corinthians. My director is telling me the answer in my ear. Yeah, I know you've read the autocue. A team you might not have heard of, but one of the best clubs in Europe in the early 1900s. They went on a tour of Brazil in 1914, and it would have changed the Corinthians forever because due to the outbreak of World War I, they had to return from Brazil halfway through that tour. Let's have a look at the documentary that's on tonight on TV.
The tragic reality for the Corinthians was that because they were public schoolmen and because they had come through Oxford or Cambridge University, the army appointed them as the officers. They were the leaders of their men. And in trench warfare in the First World War, it was those people who led their men across the line into the charge. It's probably why the Corinthians lost more men than any other football club, was because as officers, they were just wiped out.
Well, more than 100 years later, the Corinthian name lives on in two very different corners of the world. The Corinthian-Casuals play as amateurs in southwest London, while SC Corinthian-Paulista are Brazil's richest and most successful professional club. You've no doubt heard of them. Well, as I mentioned, the story's been made into a documentary called Brothers in Football. Its director, Chris Watney, is with me now. Hello.
Hello.
What a remarkable tale this is. Corinthians are described as the club that brought football to the world, that took it global. Take us back to the 1900s and its connection with Brazil just before the war broke out.
Yeah, so they were created by the FA, and they were created to improve the England national team, and they became the club that they're the only club to have ever entirely represented the England national team. And after the professional era began, they started taking on a new role, which was as missionaries, taking football all around the world, and they went to every corner of the world. And in 1910, they went to Brazil. And whilst in Brazil, they were playing games in Sao Paulo, and they inspired 5 railway workers who were watching the game to form their own club. And they were so inspired by the Corinthians that they thought, we're going to call it Corinthians-Paulista. And 100 years later, that team has become the richest club in South America, 2-time world champions. Meanwhile, the English Corinthians had a different
yeah,
experience.
There's one Corinthians team everyone's heard of, and then there's the one that plays in London. Tell me about the connection between the two.
So the team in London, the original Corinthians were the bastions of amateurism, and we've very much stuck to that sort of principle, and we've remained completely amateur. We're the highest ranked, strictly amateur football team in the country. However, the professional game has obviously, become so enormous that the amateur teams get forgotten, and that's sadly what's happened to the Corinthian-Casuals in many ways. But the Brazilian fans, more and more, since I think Facebook really became a thing where they could properly watch what was happening in London, they became fans of the Corinthian-Casuals.
And tracing the history of their club and where it all
tracing their history, yeah. And so every week we have a pilgrimage of some Corinthians-Paulista fans who have arrived in England from Brazil, 6,000 miles, and they come and they take a blade of grass with them back to Tolworth, crying, and it's quite incredible.
And the culmination of this documentary is the two teams coming together to play a match in Sao Paulo. We can have a clip, actually, from tonight's documentary. Let's take a quick look.
Vai crescendo a expectativa para o início do jogo, para o reencontro do Corinthians com a sua torcida. E os dois times vêm para o gramado. Dia histórico para o torcedor do Corinthians. E por que não para o futebol brasileiro? O Corinthians, que é time de história significativa, representativa no futebol brasileiro.
Now, we, of course, showed you the start of the match because we don't give away the end. This happened back in January 2015. What was that experience like? Because, obviously, the London Corinthians are used to playing in front of a crowd of maybe 130. How many turned out in Sao Paulo?
Yeah, 30,000 turned up on the day. and it was televised live on 2 Brazilian national TV stations. So, they claim to have 30 million fans in Brazil. So, it was an experience like one that we haven't had before. And just walking out onto the pitch, you saw there the roar from the crowd, took your breath away. And it was something where for the first 20 minutes, they were peppering shots away, trying to get an early goal. And we were just trying to, say, where are we? What are we doing? Let's just try and keep the ball for a minute. So it was a really incredible experience for the guys who are just, they're builders and they're scaffolders and taxi drivers playing against world champions. It was every man's dream. Really.
Yeah, the stuff dreams are made of.
Yeah.
And you are probably one of the best sports pub quiz questions in history. Who inflicted Manchester United's greatest ever defeat? I mean, to be fair, you'd have to have a very long memory. In fact, most people, nobody was born back then because it was 1904, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right, 11-3. And we had a couple of brothers playing who scored about 8 goals between them. But yeah, the club inspired Real Madrid to wear white, and they coined the word soccer. They really were the foundations of the world's game. And you're right, it's a pub quiz question because no one seems to know it. And it's sad because the game is so good at remembering those moments in history, and yet the Corinthians, who took football around the world, have somehow been forgotten.
And the club's founding principle was amateurism, of course, still amateur to this day, fair play, sportsmanship, and the Corinthian spirit. We love it. Congratulations on the documentary. What time's it on and where?
11:05 on ITV1.
There you go. Just after I'm a Celebrity and a bit of news, if you want to sit down and watch that. And, of course, there's always a catch-up service as well.
Yeah.
Lovely to see you. Thank you very much. Very much looking forward to that. This is the Sarah Jane Mee Show here on Sky News. Coming up...